should not come as much of a surprise. One might perhaps hope that as the signs have become more widely appreciated as objects of cultural heritage, perhaps those few that survive might stand a better chance of sticking around. But in New York, at least, no such luck, or at least we can suggest that the preservation of historic signs isn't going to just happen on its own. It needs an organized effort. More on that in a little while. In the meantime, some thoughts on photography. Photography is sort of like guerrilla preservation. Few of us would ever admit this even to ourselves, but for sign enthusiasts and documentary photographers, there's kind of a twisted satisfaction one gets in this. When a sign disappears, you've been sort of proved right. It vindicates our efforts to get out there and photograph the signs. It's as if to say, see, it was worth the trouble. Photography is indeed one approach to preserving the signs. Given the difficulties of physically preserving them, photography is a surefire way to apply a preservation strategy broadly to include an enormous number of signs. Difficult as photography can be at times, it is far, far easier than any attempt at physical preservation, but photography is only an effective means of preservation if the photographs wind up in the right place. If they are cataloged, labeled for location, date, etc., and then archived someplace where they can be accessible to researchers in the future. Taking photographs is easy, but how many of us really follow through on this last part, the making them accessible to future researchers part? That's the trick, and I have to say I haven't done such a good job of it yet myself. Photography is great, but a photograph alone only captures so much. Many older signs, for instance, have little placards that identify their makers. These placards are often so small that they aren't legible in photographs. In writing the New York Neon book, I decided pretty early on that I was going to zero in on these placards and use them as an entry point to do something that hadn't really been done much before, certainly not in New York, and that was to establish who made these things and how they were made. This is an enormously important part of the story of the signs that is being lost as we speak. Once the sign is gone, along with its little maker's placard, sometimes even the photographic record won't bridge that gap. Starting with those placards, I was able to dig into the histories of New York's neon sign makers. I tracked the companies down in old phone books, figuring out when they were active based on when they appeared in the phone book. Talking to old timers in the business, filled in more blanks. They gave me people's names, which I could then check against census data to find out more. The best information sometimes came once I published what I knew about these companies in the form of blog posts. On a few occasions, descendants of the people who had run long-vanished sign shops wrote to me and were able to send old family photographs, like this one of Nathan Salzman, whose name you still see on little placards all over New York City on signs. And they sometimes were able to provide some family lore. And I think my all-time favorite of these that came along has to do with Nathan Salzman and probably his best known sign, which is the storefront signs that still survive at Nathan's famous hot dogs out in Coney Island, Brooklyn. Supposedly, the family story goes that the Nathan's famous logo, which you could see rendered in neon there, kind of on the right over the little hot dog man, was adapted from Nathan Salzman, the sign man's signature. I have no interest in disproving the story, so I haven't actually dug up Nathan Salzman's signature to see if this is true or not, but it's a great story. And it's the kind of thing that's so easily lost from one generation to the next if it's not recorded in some way. So in the book, I made sure to include blurbs on the history of a dozen or so neon sign companies in New York, and that's maybe the part of the New York Neon book that I'm most proud of. Well, all of this is great, but what about preserving the actual signs themselves? In New York, this has proved difficult. We have no organized friends group or neon historical society, so where it's been done, it's really been done by hook or by crook and totally on an ad hoc kind of basis. We do have a landmarks commission here, a city agency in New York, but they're really tooled for architectural preservation, and things like signs have eluded their grasp. This is a sort of sad case study, the P&G bar sign, which was on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, installed in 1947, disappeared around 2009. Even though the building that it was on is technically a protected landmark. So this, some said it should not have happened. The Landmarks Commission came back and said, well, the sign belonged to the business and not to the building, so we couldn't really protect it. But that, I think, was sort of their way of getting themselves off the hook for letting this kind of slip between the cracks. We do have one sign in New York as of a few years ago that is protected as a landmark in its own right. Oops. And that is the Pepsi sign, which had been it's a big roof sign, not a storefront sign. It had been on the roof of a Pepsi bottling plant across the East River from Manhattan in Long Island City, Queens. But the preservation protective status of this is a little bit fraught legally too. In theory, I believe, as the law goes, if Pepsi were to stop funding the maintenance of this sign and another sponsor were to come along, the sign could be re-lettered under the purview of the Landmarks Commission. But at that point, you know, is it really still historic? Is it still worth preserving? I mean, it sort of gets into another question, which we won't address here. What the Landmarks Commission in New York has been effective at preserving here is mostly theater marquees. There's the famous signage of the Apollo Theater up on 125th Street, which was restored, basically replicated very well under the purview of the commission, although the movable text marquee is now LED. The New Amsterdam Theater on 42nd Street was also restored. And Radio City Music Hall at Rockefeller Center was also restored when Radio City was restored. As a purist, I'm not, it's a little jarring to see the use of fluorescent tubes, the yellow and the blue here, which did not exist when this was installed in 1932. The sign was all red historically until this restoration came along. But the Landmarks Commission they're not really sign people, so perhaps that was something that just kind of slipped past. In any case, the majority of our signs really aren't protected by landmarks, so what happens to them? This is one that's actually here over my shoulder that landed in my living room, which is a story I'll save for the after party. There are some other stories that come to mind, like that of this sign, Frank's Fish, up in Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan, that actually brokered a deal to save until the demolition contractor, when this place went out of business, broke every tube on the sign. Some of them were already broken in the process of wrenching it down to the sidewalk. So that was the end of that. I've tried over and over again to interest some local museums like the New York Historical Society and the Museum of the City of New York in signs as they're being removed from buildings and get no response at all. We have a tiny museum in Brooklyn called the City Reliquary. They have a sign or two, but their resources, mainly their space, are just so limited that they can't really take on signs. The American Sign Museum in Cincinnati is one institution that has kind of stepped forward and taken in a number of our New York signs as they've been removed from their buildings. And this is one that had been on 13th Avenue in Brooklyn that found a great home at the American Sign Museum in Cincinnati. Todd Swarmstead, thanks for sending this photo. And the sign's been beautifully restored. It was basically a kind of a ruin when they got it not that many years ago. At the moment, it now sort of looks like we have maybe two signs in New York that are one or two that are COVID orphans whose businesses have disappeared in the midst of the pandemic that might get preserved in Cincinnati. And one of these is sort of a good case study in how these things sort of come to pass. Basically, when a New York area sign enthusiast hears that one of our signs is about to be orphaned, we start making phone calls with the idea of finding a home for the thing and then figuring out how we might cover related costs, chiefly removal and transportation. This sign is one whose business unfortunately just closed. It's up in the Bronx. And photographers James and Carla Murray, who we'll hear from tomorrow, I believe, got on the phone, took the lead, and have launched a Kickstarter campaign to crowdsource funding for the sign's safe removal and hopefully transportation out to Cincinnati. So we'll see where that goes. And as I said, we'll hear more about it in their presentation. But even this falls short of the ideal for, which is, I would say, for the signs to be preserved in situ. It's in their native environment where they carry the most meaning. I mean that aesthetically, for the character they add to the streets, where they've been landmarks for generations, but also culturally, because they mark the spots of independent businesses that are neighborhood anchors, bound up in the identities of our communities. For a long time, I've had an idea in the back of my head for a group that I would call Friends of New York Neon, or FONEEN. I've thought about writing a manifesto and posting it on my now nearly defunct blog. It would be an organized effort to pool resources and dedicate them towards stemming that rate of disappearance that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. We would establish criteria for signs that would qualify as potential benefactors for our resources, signs of a certain minimum documented age, let's say. We could set ourselves up as a 501c3 and raise money that could be doled out on a matching grant basis. The signs would be restored according to established restoration guidelines. Here's an example of a sign that was kind of semi-restored, but as I know you guys in San Francisco have learned, sign restoration is really a specialty and the job can easily be botched in the wrong hands. Even with the best of intentions, this sign's completely gone now. The whole business is gone. It's an idea not too unlike what San Francisco Neon's been able to do. And while I've been thinking about it, you guys actually did it out there. Also, while I've been thinking about it, we've lost so many signs in New York that I question whether we have enough of a critical mass of preservation-worthy neon here to even be able to launch such an effort. And even if we did, could it work? Lately, the real underlying cause of death for our signs is the death of the businesses they advertise, and that to me remains the bigger problem. The idea that New York has proved itself too inhospitable a place for multi-generational independent businesses, mom and pops, to survive. And I think that more than anything, what the disappearance of these signs tells us is of the importance of keeping a place for those businesses and other things like them, because we really are the poorer for their loss. And how to keep that balance of having a community that is prosperous enough to keep such businesses viable, but not so development crazy that they simply can't survive, is the elusive end goal that I think our urban planners need to be working towards. And that's what I have to say about preserving neon signs in New York. What happens to that?
Thank you, Tom. We've got time for one quick question, if you will, from Kate Widows up in Portland, Oregon. Kate wants to know if you know what year the blue neon tubing was replaced with fluorescent tubing on the Radio City Music Hall sign.
On Radio City, I'm gonna say it was 92 off the top of my head. Kate, I'll check on that and get back to you. I think it was the early 90s though.
All right. Hey, Tom, that's good. I'm really amazed you know that. Thank you, Tom. And we will be able to ask Tom more questions at the end of all of the presentations tonight. So stick around, or if you have any questions for Tom, hold them and we will get to them after the last presenter tonight. Okay, now I'm going to present our next contestant. I'd like you to meet Stephanie Cisneros. Stephanie is a senior preservation planner for the San Francisco Planning Department, and she is our go-to person for interpreting codes and related issues about the rules and regulations that the city of San Francisco has when it comes to signage, and more specifically when it comes to vintage signage. So Stephanie, we're ready whenever you are, so take it away.
Thank you so much, Al. Thanks everyone, good evening. Glad you all are here. I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen really quickly. Let's see if this works. All right, hopefully you all can see that. All right, so good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Very excited to be a part of this symposium. So as Al said, my name is Stephanie Cisneros. I'm a preservation planner with the San Francisco Planning Department. And so this evening, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about one specific program that we have with the city that specifically relates to historic or vintage signs, as we call them. The program is called the Vintage Sign Authorization Program, and it's really a part of the local code that offers specific ways to designate and protect historic or vintage signs. It's a really great resource that the city has to help ensure the preservation of these signs that speak not only to cultural, social, architectural development of San Francisco, but also really speak to important aspects of the communities in which they're a part of. Next slide. So I'm going to do a little bit of some technical presenting, and then we'll get into some fun photos. Vintage signs within the planning code, San Francisco Planning Code, are historic signs that were up a few years ago. To be to meet our current science standards in relation to size, projection, kind of location on buildings. They're usually much bigger signs than we allow for new signs going in today. It's specifically located in section 608.14, if anybody is ever interested in digging into Article 6 of our planning code. It was passed by the Board of Supervisors in 1998 and added to the planning code originally as a process only to designate and authorize historic signs in historic districts. But it was amended in 2011 by then Board of Supervisor District Supervisor Campos in 2011. And he really amended it to not only be a way to designate signs, but to also offer protections such that they owners of these signs would be able to restore them and rehabilitate them and kind of maintain them in their existing historic states. The process for designating vintage signs includes submitting a conditional use authorization application. This process requires a hearing before the Planning Commission, and usually the application requires photos to kind of supplement the historic information presented that really speak to and demonstrate how it's important, why it's important, when the sign was put up, and kind of how it's also indicate how it's aged over the years. If it's a sign that's in dire need of restoration and kind of maintenance, or if it's been kept up pretty well. To date, we have about 4 signs that have taken advantage of this program, which I'll get into a little bit later in the presentation. There's 2 criteria to designating or authorizing these vintage signs, and one is that the sign being proposed for authorization needs to be at least 40 years old. Providing historic photos is usually really helpful in kind of making the case that it meets this criteria. A lot of signs back, in the early days didn't require building permits, or we didn't actually have that process in place to require building permits for putting up signs. So historic photos really, really help to kind of make the argument that, a sign meets this criteria. And then the second criteria is that the sign needs to have some sort of narrative that explains why it's important to the city or the community that it's located in, and kind of how it's contributed and continues to contribute to the character of the city. So just as an example, we have some signs that have been tied to businesses that have been designated as part of our the city's legacy business registry. For those who are not familiar with that, it's a registry that allows businesses that are 30 or more years old to receive this status of being a legacy business, which means that it's been around for a long time. The program offers some sort of some financial incentives to help ensure that these longstanding businesses stay in place and stay within the city. So some of the signs that have been designated have been tied to these legacy businesses, and kind of that's the narrative for why they're important and why it's important that they continue to kind of maintain these signs. So now just going to talk a little bit about the signs that have been designated so far. So this is the Coca-Cola sign located over at 601 Tompkins Street in the Bernal Heights neighborhood. It was painted on the side of this building around in the 1930s, I believe. I don't think we have a specific date, but it was put up around the 1930s, and it really became kind of a controversial part of the neighborhood prior to it being designated a vintage sign. Just to give a little bit of history about it, there was a number of community members who felt that the sign really promoted an unhealthy lifestyle. And so as kind of this disagreement as to whether or not the sign should be protected or if it should be taken down because it's promoting an unhealthy lifestyle really ensued. And so that's kind of how this controversy, if you will, is really how the vintage sign ordinance came around initially. Clearly it's still there. It's still there, and it was the city's first vintage sign that was designated in 2011, 2012, I believe. Second sign that I want to spend a little bit of time on is Doc's Clock. This is one of the city's legacy businesses. It's a long-standing bar. The photo on the left is actually the original location, about a block away from its new location on the right, which you can see there. And this sign has kind of a little bit of a sticky story. There was some disputes between the business owner and the property owner that resulted in the business, needing to find a new home, which luckily they were able to, because of their legacy status. They were able to get some funding to be able to relocate to a new storefront. And as part of their move, they needed a conditional use authorization to establish themselves in a new storefront to begin with. So they roped in their sign as part of that application, and we ultimately designated the sign a vintage sign, which allowed them to take the faces of the sign. So on the left, the sign was put over this much older of arched thing, if you will, or awning. So they kind of, when the business went in, the sign was just kind of put over that historic structure. So as part of this process of relocating to a new, taking their sign with them to their new location, they were able to carefully remove the faces of the sign and kind of reconstruct the sign in a much smaller, little bit modified size to be able to fit over their new storefront at their new location. Okay, and then these last two signs are our most recent of the Britex brick sign. Britex is a long-standing legacy business with the city, and as part of their move, a little bit similar to Doc's Clock, part of their move to a new storefront in the city, they requested that the sign be authorized to be able to recreate it at their new storefront. So they're essentially, unfortunately, not taking the original sign with them, but they are recreating it based on the original drawings and dimensions and materials of when the sign was first put up. The reconstructed sign hasn't been put up yet, but I'm hopeful that it'll happen soon. And then on the right, I'm sure a majority of us know this sign very well. It's the Ghirardelli sign that's over Ghirardelli Square. This sign was authorized, I believe, last year in order to allow it to be restored and kind of maintained in its existing state. Clearly, we didn't want to, see the sign come down, and we wanted to ensure that it received the appropriate approvals and protections to be able to maintain it in this state and make sure that it continues to be a shining landmark for the city for many, many more years. And then the next couple of slides are just some photos of my personal favorites in the city. And I just wanted to end by talking a little bit about the benefits of the vintage sign program. One of the huge benefits is that designating a vintage sign allows it to remain in its existing state as long as it can be maintained and kept up by the owner. It's beneficial for a number of reasons. The most important, at least to me, is that it allows it to remain as truly a historic artifact that speaks to the development of both, the specific neighborhood that it's in and the city at large. Once designated, these signs don't have to comply with our present day sign regulations and standards. They can stay in their existing states for as long as possible. And then a second big benefit of the program is that once designated, the vintage sign doesn't count against any proposed new signage for that specific storefront. So if we have a vintage sign that's been authorized over a storefront or a location where a business is no longer there, should a new business decide to go into that space, they're allowed to put up new signage promoting their the new business while still allowing to keep the historic sign, vintage sign in its place to kind of, in this way, I feel that it kind of speaks to kind of the evolution of the city. You have these vintage signs that are allowed to remain and really give a sense of history, and then you have these new businesses with their new signage speaking to kind of how that space has evolved and kind of what that looks like. And then just a few more photos of some of my favorites. I think one of the most important things to really think about when discussing and kind of implementing this program is that these signs are not just signs. They're not just kind of meant to be, business promotion. They're really pieces of the historic fabric of the city that speak to, as I said, the development of that neighborhood, the development of that community, and the city at large. And these signs for these, historic and legacy businesses have really come to mean something to the communities that they're in. And a lot of folks like to, they have questions about these signs and want to make sure that if a business just so happens to, vacate that space, they want to know what's going to happen to the sign and kind of what protections are offered to help make sure that these signs stay in place. So I think I ran through that a little quickly, but I am available for questions. That's my presentation. Happy to answer any questions that there might be.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. That was very informative, and I think made a lot of people in other cities very jealous. One quick question while we have you here. Sammy Zoller wants to know if anything can be done to help restore or rehabilitate the Mona Lisa restaurant sign on Columbus Avenue in North Beach.
I haven't heard that anything come up regarding that sign, but I've been thinking a lot about North Beach. So I don't believe that sign is part of our vintage sign registry. I mean, it really depends on what the scope of work would be for maintaining and kind of restoring that sign. If it's something as simple as paint, that's usually not, kind of not an issue, and anyone can go ahead and do that. If it starts to get into discussions, a little bit bigger discussions, such as, rebuilding portions of it or replacing materials, then that's kind of at the point where we would probably recommend going through the conditional use for vintage sign designation, so that those can happen and the sign would not need to be brought into compliance with current standards or current requirements.
All right.
Well, there was a mention that you're doing the Neon Gods work, Stephanie, and we really appreciate having an advocate like you in city planning. And we'd like to know more about the vintage sign registry. So maybe you've got quite a few questions in the chat, and maybe you can take a look at those as we move on to our next presenter. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, and hope to see you later. All right. Our next presenter is Jude Cook, and Jude is a 4-decade sign industry veteran. He's currently in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, where he has actually opened the Ignite Sign Museum. They opened in the fall of 2018, and it's extremely high on our list to visit the Ignite Sign Museum as soon as we possibly can. And I know Jude has also done a lot of work on the neon signs in the wonderful neon sign park in Casa Grande, Arizona.
And so, just the beautiful signs that are just out and about in Tucson, and it's a great town.
On the old Miracle Mile and other places around town. So Jude, it is your floor.
All yours.
Got to get back to the share here. Bear with me. Okay, I've lost the share thing. I had this before. There it is. Come on. Getting the wrong button. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So I'm going to address what we've been doing here in Tucson. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Very good. Most of the work we've done out in Tucson over the last year and a half or so have been signs that have come down because of road widening. And then I've got a few that have came down because of construction. or they've closed up business. I'm going to go ahead and hit it. This particular sign, National Auto Glass, was a sign that I restored for the original owners of the business. We have a photo of this sign on the wall in 1960, so the business was there late 50s, early 60s. They widened the road, and the building it was on was going to have to be torn down, and the original owners approached us. We got the city to allow us to take it down and reposition it onto another building on the property, which worked out good for about 3 years. But they sold the business, and the other guys changed the name, and they didn't want it called National Auto Glass when their name was Star Auto Glass. So we got a call from the shop that was building the new sign, said, we're taking it down on Tuesday, be there at 9. So this sign currently is on the outside of the Ignite Sign Art Museum, rehung. It's got the neon back in it. I've still got to finish wiring and get primary power to it. It is just a simple, classic, beautiful old neon. Here's another one. This one, House of Carpets, again, is from what we can tell, is from the late 50s, early 60s, and the location it's on is where it got moved to around 1980, because that's when the permits show up in the city records. So I was aware that this was coming down because of the construction project, and I was watching it, and I was in touch with the city, and I drove by one day late last December, and the fire department was practicing fire department stuff on the building, and that's always a sign that the building's coming down. And I called the city, and it was right at the holidays and didn't get a call back. I come back about a week later, building is down, sign is not there. I can't find any residue for the sign, broken glass, cans, or anything. And finally, about 5 or 6 days later, I got a call back from the city, and I asked about it. They said, well, you could bid on it at auction. And that's not the setup we had with the city. So I went back to Tucson Historic Preservation Foundation and worked with them and got them to give it to Tucson Historic Preservation, who then gave it to the museum. And so what we've done so far is the city, when they took it down, cut it into 3 pieces and broke 5 units of glass in the process. We've got those repaired, and now it's just a matter of getting it up on the building, getting it up at Ignite here in the future. Okay, this sign, this arrow sign, does not have neon on it, but it was on a parking lot in downtown Tucson. And I got a call about a week before it was supposed to be torn down from a local guy that was aware of it and said, get a hold of the city, find out who the contractor was. I reached out to the contractor, and he was delighted to have us take it down. So we got down there and took it down. And my plan for it, because it really wasn't special as far as graphics, is I've now got a permit for it to use it as a parking sign, which is what the graphic is on the right side of the screen here. So we're in the process of stripping it and getting it ready to re-letter. Okay, this beauty, this is the Grantstone Shopping Center sign, and this did not come down because of road widening when it came down, but it would have come down because of road widening because it was just across the street from the National Auto Glass sign. Anyway, the folks had it taken down and put up a new, boring little backlighted plastic sign. We contacted the company that took it down, and I asked them to save it, and they did until about 8 months ago when they called up and said, you're ready for it? So it's currently sitting in storage in the backyard at the Ignite Sign Art Museum. And our plan on this one, and I really don't have any choice, pretty much going to have to strip it down, repaint it, and put it back together again. It's too rough, and if it stays outside long enough, there won't be anything left on it at all. We do have most of the neon. I haven't tested it all, but most of it's intact. I think the only thing we may have lost was the yellow neon, which was a double stroke on the arrow, but it's, structurally it was in pretty good shape. This sign at one point actually rotated, and it's a 10-foot by 20-foot sign, so it's a pretty massive sign. It's actually the biggest one we've got here at the museum. Samiengo Grill and Bar. Samiengo Grill and Bar was in a house that was built by a guy named Samiengo, and at a point late 70s, early 80s, it was converted into a restaurant. And when we relocated out to Tucson, we'd eaten there, actually ate there many times. This sign I cannot date specifically, The transformers say that it's from about 2000, but also the name was changed from San Diego House to San Diego Place. And because this sign's going to have to be inside, isn't going to have to be inside, but because it had been so cobbled up, we are actually, as you can see in the right photo, repainting it, and we've got about 75% of the neon ready to go, and it'll be hung, I don't know, possibly outside because it's got fresh paint on it. Oh, this one. Okay, SPCA sign. As you can see, the neon holes make no sense for the lettering whatsoever. We heard about this sign, excuse me, about noon, and the gal said, if we want the sign, we need to get there that day. So I got a hold of one of my guys with the crane truck over on the far side of town and said, you need to meet me over at the SPCA. We went over there. They'd already cut it down and laid it on the ground. We picked it up. We've sat on it for about, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years. We did some research and determined that it had been a veterinary hospital in that location since the late 40s, and the transformer in it was dated from 1949, so that's pretty accurate. And we were able to determine that it had been built as Tucson Small Animal Hospital and then sold and changed to Desert Small Animal Hospital. Well, in looking at the sign, you can oftentimes see a ghost of some of the lettering. I couldn't see anything on this thing, so I started sanding on it, and I found underneath the SPCA, I found blue background white letters, and it said South Tucson Animal Control, but that never had neon on it. So I kept sanding, and I finally started to find Small Animal Hospital, and then I got a little bit of desert, and I kept sanding because the desert didn't make sense with the neon holes, and finally got all the way down to Tucson. The colors turned out to be green, white, dark green outline, and what we call imitation gold on the little chevron on the right side and on the bottom. This sign isn't that unusual out here. I have uncovered different lettering on probably 7 or 8 of the different signs we've restored. And this one, we had to repaint it because it wasn't relevant the way it was. Ralph's Cafe is a sign that was in Casa Grande, Arizona, and it was brought to us. When we got it, it was all white, and we had no indication of color. We had a really bad photo, not a photo, bad ad out of a newspaper, or maybe a photo that kind of indicated the script. And this is another one where we sanded down and uncovered colors and scripts, and were able to get a pretty accurate reproduction of it. It's currently in place in the Casa Grande Neon Sign Park in Casa Grande. If you ever get that way, well worth the stop. Okay, these next couple of signs are a little bit off the beaten path as far as neon preservation, but I think it's important. This Denny's Diner sign, it's really a nice design, and it has neon on it, and it's only about 20 years old, but you know, my policy here at Ignite is if it's a cool sign, it doesn't have to be really old. So we've got this one actually restored and looking good, and it's actually sitting right next to me, but you can't see it from where you're at. And the next one is another one of that same situation. This is probably only 10 or 15 years old. Channel letters, exposed neon. It was in good condition, and it seems a shame not to at least grab it and hang on to it, because in another 10 or 15 years, you guys will all think it's classic. I think that's what I've got for you if you've got any questions. Let's see. There we go.
All right. Thanks very much, Jude. Nice presentation. I really enjoyed it. And particularly that small animal hospital sign is really simple and beautiful. But really enjoyed that one. So let me ask you, how are things going for the Ignite Sign Museum?
Oh, it's been a little spotty. I mean, we shut down for 2 months. We got opened up again, and actually we're getting pretty decent traffic. And then probably as everybody in this place has heard, our cases of COVID spiked, and we got kind of quiet for another 2 or 3 weeks. We had decent traffic today, and we anticipate some decent traffic tomorrow. We're trying a little neon project where we take scrap neon and people come in and we provide everything they need to make a little neon art piece that they can take home with them. So we're doing that tomorrow, and we're doing that the next week. And we've had one small party here, but it's still quiet. We're not getting the traffic we'd like. We're getting locals right now, whereas up until this started, we got more visitors than we did locals. But we're holding up pretty good.
Good. Have you seen signs around that on businesses around town? Are they still in pretty good shape? Here in San Francisco, we've had at least one incident of vandalism on a sign where buildings are closed, businesses are closed because of the pandemic, but it seems, they almost look like they've been vacated. So I don't know how things are in other cities, but have you experienced any of that?
We haven't had any trouble with the neons, with the historic stuff. We've got, I did about 23 restorations in Tucson, and we've got about 45 to 50 actual working neon signs still in Tucson. And I haven't had any follow-up on repair. Oh, I had a little repair on our diving girl downtown, but I think that was just a repair. I don't think it was vandalism. We've done well, and we had some riots downtown early on when this stuff all happened, but they stayed away from her.
Morgan's got a question.
Morgan Cook has a question for you.
Good.
When you sand down, do you find paint or porcelain?
I find very little porcelain out here. I've only worked in Tucson. I can only come up with 2 porcelain signs in the entire city. I'm sure there were more, but if it's porcelain, I'll strip it. But if it's metal, if it's tin and painted like most of our signs, I never find porcelain out here. Hardly ever find porcelain.
That's interesting. Yeah, I would have thought that you would see more porcelain there just because of its resistance to the weather, and get some pretty extreme weather.
The porcelain makes good sense. I think a lot of the porcelain that was here went away, but because of the boom we had after the war with the driving routes, a lot of signs were just done painted tin, and that really is most of it. I restored one porcelain sign for a big old motel downtown, and it's still in great shape. Other than that, I do have one. The Mr. Quick hamburger sign that we've got. It's actually Tucson Historic Preservations, and it is in phenomenal condition. I've got it in the lobby here at the museum, and I've got the rest of the sign at the shop, and that's one of the 2 porcelain signs that I've seen in the entire city.
You've got a question in the chat about Mr. Quick, so we'll let you go look at the Q&A and answer online there.
Okay.
Thank you so much
thank you guys.
for what you're doing and for your presentation.
You're welcome. It's fun.
Great, and we'll hope to see you in Tucson really soon.
And hang out later for the longer Q&A. There might be more questions, but definitely check out the chat and the Q&A. You've got some questions there.
We'll be here, and I'll answer them online.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Guys.
All right, so next up, we have a little movie that was made by the Preservation Action Council by San Jose. I know everybody in the Bay Area, one of the all-time favorites is The Dancing Pig of San Jose. So that was restored this year, and we're gonna play this little video so you can see what happened. And Al, you tell them you were there live. So it's just a stall for time for me.
Yeah, this is a sign that's been on our radar for a long time, and it was pretty exciting to watch the restoration project and people involved. And one of the people involved was our good friend of all things neon, Heather David, who I think you're going to see makes an appearance in this video. And we went to the reopening ceremony as well last summer, I believe. And it was great to see a large crowd of people out there. The Stevens Meat Company, which still exists, handed out free hot dogs. There was free ice cream. A family pulled up in their sedan and got out with, I think they had a tuba, a trumpet, a snare drum. So it was a really folksy event for that relighting ceremony. A lot of fun was had by all. And here we go. Here's the video.
Stephen Pizzo was of Italian descent and started making sausage in the early 20th century. When he started out, he decided not to use his family name for the company, but instead his first name, and that is how Stephen's Meat Products got started. By the 50s, his sausage and hot dogs were so popular that a gleaming new factory was built in downtown San Jose. At the same time, a large neon sign by Electrical Products Corporation with the Xeon brand mark was constructed at the factory site. Not just any sign, but a multicolor animated sign. It featured a piggy appearing to dance with legs and arms moving at a fast cadence. To top it off, his tail squiggled and unsquiggled. This articulation is the reason it became known as the Dancing Pig. In the early 1990s, the site was eyed for a large downtown baseball stadium. The brand was sold, production shut down, and the factory demolished. Fortunately, a local neighborhood activist convinced the San Jose Redevelopment Agency, the new owner of the site, to keep the sign around. Thank goodness for that. No one can remember when the sign stopped working, but slowly and steadily the sign became damaged, neon tubes busted, and the porcelain enamel dingy with dirt and grime, pierced by at least 2 bullet holes. But the Dancing Pig remained popular, a familiar sight to long-term residents who remembered seeing it lit, and perhaps enjoyed the sausage made by the namesake Stephen. And new residents and visitors would pass by it, some every day on their way to San Jose's main train station, a short block away. Long after the baseball stadium idea was dead, a huge development was proposed near the Diridon train station that would include the site and the beloved neon sign. Preservation Action Council of San Jose mobilized in mid-2017 to fight to save the sign. San Jose has many neon signs, but we've also lost many signs over the years. Folks drive by them every day and barely see them because they've been in place for so long. Several of these signs are iconic, but the Dancing Pig is one of the largest, most unique, and recognized. That's why we call it our Dancing Pig. Realizing that time was of the essence, we embarked on what could be considered a classic advocacy campaign. The first important step was a September 2017 vote by PAC-SJ's Board of Directors approving a $5,000 contribution to a fund dedicated to the repair and relighting of the pig. The contribution was intended to match donations by others and kickstart the campaign. A chance letter written to Bassian Farms, the owner of the Stevens brand and where several former Stevens employees still worked, proved to be the first major win. Bassian pledged a $5,000 match soon after receiving the letter. From there, we mobilized a committee that met frequently. We brainstormed a list of things to do. Included were getting repair estimates, other fundraising activities, political strategies, possible alliances, custom graphics to accompany a PR campaign, and more. No idea was too outlandish. We just kept meeting and meeting, refining the tasks as progress was made. Different committee members took on various tasks to spread the workload. Bassian generously printed up 240 of the first of what would be 3 iterations of Stevens t-shirts. Each version of the shirt improved to reinforce PAC-SJ's commitment and connection to the campaign. We organized several events to raise awareness and monies to grow the Restoration Fund. One was a specific fundraiser held at Poorhouse Bistro, a Cajun restaurant about a block from the sign. In other cases, we piggybacked, pun intended, on other community events to set up booths to educate the public, gather donations, and sell more shirts. We initiated contact with city council members and the mayor to secure donations, talked to the Arts Commission, San Jose's Office of Economic Development, and anyone who would listen. We handed out informational materials and our San Jose Signs Guide. Publicity and an end-of-year fundraising appeal brought the Restoration Fund to just over $14,000 by the beginning of 2018. We kept at it. By September 2018, we had raised over $32,000. By that time, Google had completed negotiations with the city for the parcel the sign stands on, and so now we could begin meeting directly with Google to help preserve the sign. In November, we announced in a press release that our $35,000 fundraising goal had been achieved. Hundreds of donations were received, both large and small, from concerned citizens. In addition, none of this would have been possible without the tireless volunteers who staffed more than 7 fundraising events. Several well-respected sign companies prepared detailed bids to restore the famous neon sign. Young electric sign company Yesco was selected as the winning bidder to perform the repairs, which were completed in June of 2019. Having built and repaired neon signs for nearly 100 years, Yesco was thrilled to be involved with the renovation. And a local neon craftsman, Kevin Chong, was the subcontractor to fabricate the new tubes. Once the dancing pig was on track to be repaired, it only made sense to plan a party, a big party, to celebrate nearly 2 years of effort and commitment by many. I called it a re-dancing party because we weren't just relighting the sign, we were bringing our pig back to life. We took over the parking lot next to the sign where a hot dog vendor gave away free Stevens brand hot dogs with chips, sodas, and all the fixins. Several hundred folks showed up to enjoy the food, mingle, reminisce, and hear enthusiastic comments made by a few key supporters. Then we enjoyed ice cream while waiting for it to get dark enough to re-dance the pig. With a hearty countdown, our dancing pig was back.
We're going to have a countdown, and we're going to start at 10, and I think we're going to do a little jingle with the cymbals or something like that to get us started. All right. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
From the very beginning, the Save Our Dancing Pig campaign was not just about this one sign, but intended to highlight the plight of many neon signs in San Jose and provide impetus for creating a neon boulevard. Google has generously contributed funds to the future preservation and restoration of neon signs in San Jose. There are 2 leading routes for this driving tour, but we will be gathering stakeholders to get a better sense of support, scope, and tasks that would need to be accomplished to bring this neon boulevard to reality. Just as with our sign campaign began, we need a dedicated committee with leadership to bring this to fruition, even as development pressures escalate the risk to our existing neon sign inventory. Thanks for listening.
All right. That was really fun to see. It was kind of fun to relive that relighting ceremony. That was a good night. And we are fortunate enough to have André Luthard join us from the Preservation Action Council San Jose. André, we've got a number of questions for you. I think one that has come up quite a bit in the chat is, are those shirts and buttons and all that merchandise still available?
I don't think he's, I think he's still muted. If you can unmute, André.
No?
And we'll see if we see him. Okay, can you hear us? Okay. I don't know if anybody else can hear you, but we can't.
Okay, go there.
Yeah. let's go over here. Okay, we can't hear André, but we will try to do something about that. I don't know if you're talking, André, but we can't hear you. Somehow you don't have your audio on. So I think we might have to send you to the Q&A and to answers. You've got some questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you can see that, but and I'm not sure why we can't hear you, but we can't. Believe it or not, André and I, we rehearsed this. So he is chatting with you. So everybody can go to the chat and ask André your questions. And again, we really appreciate you guys being part of Neon Speaks, and we really appreciate that all the work and money and blood, sweat, and tears everybody in San Jose put forward to save that beautiful sign. Okay, I guess then if we can't hear André, we're ready to move on, and if we can get André's audio going, we'll talk to him at the end.
All right, now I'd like to present Corky Scholl, our friend from Denver, Colorado. Corky founded the Denver, Colorado-based organization called Save the Signs in 2012. And to date, Corky has saved 11 large neon signs in Denver and in other locations around the state of Colorado. So Corky, without any further ado, it is your time on the floor.
All right, well, thank you all for being here, and thanks for having me. I just wanted to take a few moments to highlight some of the preservation efforts in Denver that are going on this past year. So even before the new year officially began, there was some good news. In December, the Branding Iron Motor Lodge sign on East Colfax was uncovered. And there you see it in a 1980 photo that John Margulies took. The sign was first installed in the 1950s, and it had long been assumed to have been scrapped. However, the new owner of the property discovered it was hiding beneath the newer plastic sign and now wants to restore it. And there you see it completely uncovered. Then in January, the owner of Bell Plumbing and Heating reached out to me to ask if I could find a good home for his sign. The sign was a Denver landmark from 1955 to 2001, and it was long assumed to have been scrapped. However, the owner had kept it in storage for the past 19 years and needed to part with it because the business was moving again. It can now be found at the Counterpath bookstore in the East Colfax neighborhood of Denver. Then some bad news. The Colonial Manor motel sign had been in storage at Gordon Sign Company for the past year. In March, I found out that Gordon Sign Company, one of the oldest sign companies in the country, was going out of business. So with the help of Glenn Wesselo from Maury's Neon and Jeff Bebout from Glass Arrow Coffee Roasters, we moved the sign to a new location, and we're currently looking for a new home for it. One of the consequences of Gordon Sign going out of business is that they sold the leases on all of their vintage signs that are scattered around Denver to a new sign company. The company currently removed the plastic panels to the 1960s era Capitol Liquor signs and is currently working with the business owner on a new lease agreement to get the panels put back. Then there's the Town and Country Motel sign, which was demolished a few months ago. I contacted the demolition company, who informed me the developer was going to safely remove the sign and keep it. And just a few weeks ago, the owner of Admiral Sign Company, contacted me to let me know she was contracted to remove the Lookers Derby sign on Route 40 in Idaho Springs, Colorado. She says the sign is in good hands and she's looking for a way to get it displayed publicly again. And also a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to save a piece of Colorado history. Village Inn started in Colorado Springs as a mom and pop restaurant in 1937. In 1956, it was bought by new owners with ambitions to expand the business. And in 1958, the first Village Inn Pancake House was opened at 8855 East Colfax, which happens to be just a few blocks away from my house. In the 1990s, Village Inn started redecorating their restaurants with the orange and green neon signs most of us are familiar with. Because of the local history, I've been wanting to save one of these signs, and I was finally successful earlier this month. And I have a video now of some projects that both Maury's Neon Sign have been working on, about 3 restoration projects, as well as Pueblo's Neon Alley, who added about 13 new signs this summer. So without further ado, here's the video.
This is kind of both of our passion to keep the old signs, keep the history alive. And it's just sad that so many have ended up in the dump that could have been kept alive. My name is Glenn Westlow. We're here at Maury's Neon, Denver, Colorado.
I'm Todd Matuszewicz, and I'm here at Maury's Neon with Glenn.
This year we did the Eddie Bauer Motel on West Colfax, and we did the IOF on South Broadway. And this Frontier sign, the drive-in sign, will go to Alamosa. A Frontier Drive-In in Alamosa, Colorado, contacted us, and they're gonna put the drive-in back in service, so they wanted their sign restored.
There was a lot of rust in the Frontier sign, and they wanted to keep the patina, kind of that sweat on it, right? And so initially you just had to tear the sign apart, pull all the rust parts out of it. And because they wanted to save the patina, we couldn't reskin it and re-sheet metal it. So we did a lot of interior fiberglassing, a lot of rust mitigation. The second part is the people that are re-putting a sign back in service, they want, new glass on it, but they didn't want the original glass, which was single stroke. And so it's all going to double stroke, which means there's going to be a lot more transformers, a lot more housings, a lot more wiring. So the sign has to be beefed up a little bit internally to hold the expanded neon that will be on it.
I love the character of it. It's not just a rectangular square sign. It's just very, very unique.
So I have a great appreciation for people that actually spend the money and take the interest to save signs. So like the Pig and Whistle, it would have been probably cheaper and quicker to just tear it down and make a new sign.
So we completely restored that, repainted it, rewired it, put all new neon on it. Complete sign restoration.
So Glenn's family's been here in Colorado for like 100 years.
Yeah.
And my family's been in Colorado 130 years, so I think both of us have a great fondness for the history of Denver. And both of us are sign guys, so we have a specific fondness for the history of the signs of Denver. So it's really fun to see that people are starting to care about them, and there's a way to save them. Back in the day, we were just doing it on our own, and now there's a whole group of people that are really trying to make it happen, and so greatly appreciate it.
Right, hats off, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was certainly nothing subtle about it. The whole idea was in your face, here it is, come on in.
My name is Joe Consilia. I'm an attorney in Pueblo, Colorado, a small town in southern Colorado, and developed a number of years ago a passion for collecting neon signs. Well, Pueblo's Neon Alley is a collection of vintage and reproduced neon signs. It runs one block, and I think right now I have about 67 signs. I hope to put 100 signs in before I die. The 3 vintage signs that I put up this year are the Anchor Lounge, the Walgreens drugstore sign, and the Steel City Electric sign. This year, I had 13 signs created and shipped here, and during this COVID pandemic, I basically had all 13 signs hung in this place I call Pueblo's Neon Alley. The city has found it to be, an incredible draw for the entire city. Whenever I come down here and I see that alley that used to have 1 or 2 people a night in it, and maybe now have 75 to 100 people a night, it's something that makes me feel good.
All right, so that's my entire presentation right there.
Well, you couldn't hear us, but we were clapping for you. That was great. And I love that you put some applause, and wow, you guys have saved some really amazing signs.
Yes, and I should have mentioned in my intro for Corky that he's a man who knows his way around a camera. Those are your films, your videos, and just beautiful. Just very similar to other work I've seen of yours. It's always such high quality and so compelling and interesting to watch. Those were really great, Corky. And the Eddie Bohm, can you give us a little backstory on that? Because that last time we talked at Neon Speaks, that was still in the works, and you were I think at that point hoping for the best outcome, and it kind of looks like that's what you got. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, that was a tough one. That was years and years and years in the making. Probably like 5 years from when a new property owner bought the property. It's a marijuana dispensary now, and it took him, I think, a few years to. I think originally Denver City Council didn't want to allow him to have the marijuana company right there, and anyway, he took them to court and won that case. And so that took a few years, but immediately when I saw the property had been sold, I reached out to him and let him know how great his sign was, and let him know that I hoped that he would restore it, which he seemed very receptive to. And it just took a long time to go through all the zoning to find a way to restore this historic sign. He really just wanted to restore it the way it was. And there was just no avenue within Denver City Sign Code to do that. It was just really, really kind of a hassle, combined with the fact that it's a marijuana business, kind of added some complexities to it. And then it's not really on his property. The sign was built kind of right in the city's right of way off the sidewalk. And back at the time, they just looked the other way. They didn't really care. But now, it became an issue when it came time to restore it. So all of those things just made it take years and years to find a path forward to restoring it. And finally, it was relit this just during COVID, back in March or April, I think. And Glenn and his crew at Maury's Neon just did a great job with it.
I look forward to seeing it next time I get a chance to come to Denver. You had a question, right?
Well, yeah, there's a question in the chat, Corky, because everyone's dreaming about being able to travel again. And so they're saying when they come to Denver, are you going to be doing any tours? They said like San Francisco tours. And I know you've done one at least for the National Trust. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I did a bus tour with for the National Trust. They had their annual conference out here last year, I think last fall. And so I did a bus tour of Colfax Neon. And that's the only tour I've done so far. I was supposed to do another one in June, sometime this spring, for Colorado Preservation Inc. But then because of COVID, that got canceled. So I don't have too much experience with the tours, but I'd love to give it another shot sometime.
We would love to see an online tour. And if you need any support from a couple of pals, you know who to call.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I know for people who are not familiar with Colfax in Denver, if I'm not mistaken, Corky, it's the longest commercial strip in the United States, right? So a walking tour is out of the question. You definitely need to be on wheels because it would take you a couple of weeks to do it otherwise.
Yeah, it would, unless you chose a concentrated area.
Right.
So other great pocket of neon in Denver, I think you just have to mention the amusement park. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Lakeside Amusement Park is the greatest experience you'll ever have. If you ever come out to Denver, go to Lakeside. And
it's really mind-blowing. It really is.
Yeah, all of the ticket booths and all of the rides. Back in the late 40s, a mid-century architect and former neon sign maker, Richard Crowther, came out and he designed all of these awesome neon signs there. And most of those signs are still up in the park, just perfectly preserved. You know, got the old rickety roller coaster, you know, not a whole lot of brand new stuff, which makes it just a really cool experience.
Yeah, I think if you ever are lucky enough to go to heaven, I think it's going to look a lot like Lakeside Park.
For some people, their idea of heaven.
Some of those rides are so old, and they're obviously not in use anymore. Most of them are. They have trees growing through the rides themselves, so it's quite a place.
I'll put a link in the chat to Lakeside Park. You can have a look. It's really pretty amazing.
All right. Well, Corky, thanks so much. That was great. Thanks for being part of Neon Speaks again this year. We appreciate it. And I hope you'll be able to stick around in the chat because I'm sure people will have some questions for you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Okay. And last, but certainly not least, we have the legendary Debra Jane Seltzer, who just got off the road. She was on the road for a 10-state road trip, checking on the state of all of our programmatic architecture, neon signs, incandescent bulb signs, porcelain signs, you name it, Debra Jane has made a record of it. Please go to Debra Jane's bio. And if you are not aware of Debra Jane's roadside architecture website, you need to know about it. You need to go and take a look at it.
And what's it called?
It is called, tell me, there's Road Arch.
Roadside Architecture.
I always go to
roadarch.com for short.
Right. Okay, so Debra, take off.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm not the most high tech. Okay, let's get rid of that. All right. I got to share my screen. That's what I got to do. Hold on. I got to get back to this and share my screen. You don't want to see that, do you? Okay. And then plug this puppy in. Y'all can hear me, I guess.
Yes.
And you can see my screen.
You've got a full screen.
Fabulous. Whew. Okay. So let me go back up. There we go. I live in Ventura, California, but I lived in New York City for 32 years, and my focus is national. I try to cover the entire country, which is nuts, I know. What I wanted to do this time is do a little bit of sign news, a little roller coaster ride here of ups and downs. What's happened around the country, just a few signs in the past year. So a lot has happened, and this is just a fraction of that. So here we go. As they say, hold on to the bar and fasten your seatbelt. So I'm going to start with the bad news. This sign here in Wallace, California, which is a tiny town just northeast of Stockton, California. This restaurant, Italian restaurant and bar, closed in 2003, and the sign had been staying there until just now, and the family took it down. What they're going to do with it, I don't know. Dixie Pottery, probably from the 50s in Abington, Virginia. They closed around 2008, and they're now converting the building into like a strip mall type multi-business thing. So this one is down, and the building owner wouldn't tell me where it's gone. On the right, the Prescott Valley Motel in Prescott Valley, Arizona, was, let me see, installed in 1967. They decided to build the motel had been down for a while, and then they built a Circle K there. And this sign, fortunately, local fundraising saved the sign, $4,000 to remove the sign, and it's now in the Arizona Sign Association storage. Stonewall Jackson was a Confederate general, so this sign has been removed for political correctness. The same thing may happen with some fantastic scaffold rooftop signs in El Paso. The Hotel Robert E. Lee sign may also come down due to this whole, monument removal and all that. This sign on the left in Alamogordo, New Mexico, it had been in this kind of shape for decades. This was originally a Rocket Motel, and what's particularly sad about this is Alamogordo has always been sort of space age, rocket oriented due to the White Sands missile range nearby, and this was one of the very few rocket symbols left. It's now in a private collector / sign seller's hands. On the right, Boose's Flowers in St. Charles, Missouri. The business is still there, but this sign is now with a collector. The good news is that he discovered under that Teleflora logo, top left there, the original porcelain. This was just a vinyl stick-on, and it looks beautiful underneath. It was an earlier logo. Okay, this sign also in a private collection now, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I believe they removed the arrow. I don't know why, but I think they are in different people's hands if the arrow even survived. Let's see. Pet Boys in Fresno, California. This store closed and all of the signs have been removed. I have a feeling that Pet Boys probably destroyed them, as a lot of corporate business owners do to protect their image. I don't know, I'm kind of hoping. I know that Manny, Mo, and Jack on the left there, Museum of Neon Art in Glendale, Mona, has similar signs. But this, the vertical sign on the roof there, that's still there, but it's just naked. These two signs were destroyed in the Minneapolis riots. The Minnehaha liquor sign on the left. There's also a wraparound kind of rounded sign, and I believe both of these were like burnt and destroyed when that business was burned down. Town Talk Diner, I've seen pictures of that one laying like totally trashed on the ground. There's no recovering that. This one, typical way to save money, get yourself an operating sign that can be visible at night instead of repairing the neon. Here on the left, you see this is in Coldwater, Michigan. The saluting soldier there that was animated at one time. And then on the right, the plastic sign, which has now replaced it, and you can see those Cadet Motor letters still on the ground below the plastic sign on the right. This sign here, I've got multiple photos. The first one I took in 2008. Oh, by the way, I took all the photos unless I provide a credit. These are the original colors on the left. I took this photo in 2008, and then in 2009, God knows why, they repainted it silver and black. And now, just like weeks ago, the store had closed, a new jewelry store moved in and tacked that piece of crap up on the top. The King Tower Cafe in Tama, Iowa, opened in the 1930s. And this sign, they're trying to restore the building, I think put it back to use, whatever it is, it's a Route 66 thing and all that. But it looked quite beautiful enough to me on the left, but this is what they replaced it with. Neon was too expensive, they painted it, it has sort of a neon outliney look, but it ain't my thing. And the souvenir sign below it is now gone. The Classen Inn Motel in Oklahoma City. On the blurry picture on the left is a postcard image, and you can see it had 3 bollies that might have been backlit from inside, and kind of a funky base. I think there were holes in it. I don't know if it got replaced at one time. It doesn't look like paint to me. And then kind of it's been repainted many times. And the middle photo there, 2011, purpley. And now just recently, they renovated the motel. It looks really nice. And they replaced the bollies with these guys. It's kind of like a flat round guys on the far right and left. And then a Sputnik-y type sign in the middle. Now, I haven't been able to find out I assume, but I can't promise, that the Sputnik-y in the middle probably has the original flashing bulbs. Okay, this was a heartbreak that actually has a happy ending. On the left, Weiss Liquors in Nashville, the sign was totally trashed by a tornado this year. And you'll see in the middle what it looked like from the roof looking down on it. We all assumed Dunsky's gone, but they actually saved Dunsky's. But they saved the panels. You can see from their Facebook page here on the right, they are going to reconstruct this sign, neon and all. The Minghua sign was originally built in 1966 for the Gung Ho restaurant. And then in 1977, it was adapted. A few months ago, the sign crashed to the ground. Probably the base of the pole was rusted out, and it was, the neon was trashed and all that, but the owner was determined to get it restored. Some wonderful guy in Spokane, Washington, set up a GoFundMe page, and they were able to get half of it paid for within 2 weeks. They got funding from all the sign community, sending money from all over the country, and then the insurance paid the other half. So this guy, if he's not up now, he'll be up within weeks. One of my favorites, Norwich Village laundromat signs. On the left is what it looked like for decades. I'm happy to say that if my website hasn't done anything, it at least helped sort of save this sign. There were thousands of these Norwich Village revolving backlit signs installed around the country in the early 60s. Later, Norwich was the brand name, and they used stripes instead of polka dots. But regardless, there are about 60 of these guys left, most of them in totally trashed, cracked, faded condition, maybe only 10 of them that look decent-ish. And the only one that is lit and spinning until this was in Iron Mountain, Michigan. The new owner of this laundromat found my website, and because he was just looking for history, what was a Norwich Village? What was that all about? And when he realized that there was only one other one that was lit and spinning, he decided to get his going, and that's what he did. He got a friend of his to help him with the wiring inside, and they replaced the incandescent lighting inside with LED, which is brighter, and replaced the band around the middle, and there you go. That's in Dalton, Georgia, I should say. Okay, this sign is only from 1980, but I think it's pretty special. Las Vegas, Glitter Gulch, Vegas Vicky, the companion, so to speak, of Vegas Vic, which is just across the Fremont Street from her. She was only built in 1980. They originally, her leg was supposed to kick, that top leg, but it just never worked right, so they gave up. So they demolished the casino in 2017, and the sign was saved and removed, and it is now on display inside and restored inside the Circa Resort and Casino. I don't know what happened to the lower sign, which I think is pretty special. That crazy blue turquoise, you know, inside the channels there, that neon is really super. I hope it is somewhere. If at the Neon Museum, I would hope. Okay, I love this one. This one's in Worcester, Massachusetts. It has ripple tin, and it has raised embossed letters. The deli itself was, let's see, it opened in 1920, and it closed, and everybody sort of freaked about, wondering what's happened to the sign, but luckily it has a new home. It should be moved over there within a few weeks to the Watchusett, I think I said it right, Brew Yard. I'm not sure, I think it's going to be displayed inside, but I'm not positive. House of Spirits in Los Angeles, Echo Park. This one, there was a fire these signs, according to Didia, these signs were built in 1947, and they are pretty special. They are each like little separate signs in of themselves. The little house, the little smoke coming out the chimney, the tree, the glass on the left, the bottle on the right, and the pole sign on the lower right. There was a fire and the business closed in 2018, but luckily these signs have been saved, all of them, and are now in storage at MONA, the Museum of Neon Art. And they are looking for a place in the community where these were originally installed in Echo Park, where these can go back up again. And this was a recent find. They were doing some renovation and taking off all the crap in the front of the building, and they found this Ador Milk Farms sign underneath. It's from the 1930s. Those letters have neon on top of them. And fortunately, the business that's going in wants to keep the sign as is, get it restored. So that's another happy ending. And lastly, the Flash TV and appliance sign. This is from 1965. The business had been closed for years, and fortunately, they're renovating the building as the Flash Apartments, and they are restoring the sign. So this one will also live on. So in closing, you know, a lot of this has been covered throughout the presentation from other people, but the threats to neon signs, one of my pet peeves is, yes, we'd all like to see these signs left in place, but frequently what happens is the signs, because they are big, and if the new owners of the building want to put their sign up, they'll be stuck with some little dinky thing. So they frequently will strip the paint and the neon, if there's any left, and put their name in some horrible, you know, Comic Sans font. So that's just one of the things. Is it better to stay in place, or is it better to take it to a museum? I mean, if you can't get the city to landmark it and say, no, you cannot touch the text on that sign. Or is it better to go somewhere else where it will be preserved? Collectors, so pros and cons, the sign is saved, although it's not where it should be, where it would have been originally, and we can't see it. Weather, vandalism, the Tommy's Joint sign in San Francisco, and what can we do about it? It goes a long way to tell the business owner, you know, give them thumbs up from the street that how much you love their sign. And I do believe it's very important to share information with the business owners. Frequently don't even know that their sign is unique or it's one of 5 left. That can go a long way to keeping things in place. And community information, like the Norwich Village sign, and then fundraising, like the example I gave about the gung ho Minghua sign. When you post it, and you posted it all those Facebook sites, some fundraiser, you'd be surprised how quickly and how much money you can raise to save something. Landmarking and city matching fund grants, which means frequently you can get through some city money set aside, 50% business owner, 50% city. And so, you know, you can save a lot of signs through some of these methods. Other people can speak more about that, but I do believe information and casting a wide net and letting people know can go a long way. All right, that's my spiel. So I will stop this.
Okay, thank you, Deborah Jane.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. Great photographs, by the way. Really excellent exposures. Nice work. I have a question for you before we bring back all of our panelists for a Q&A. Lippy wants to know, how do you get all of the history on these signs?
I dig. I look around online. I look, Google like crazy, newspapers.com. I do what I can. When I write articles, which I take a little bit more seriously than the thousands of pictures at my website, I think I have, well, I've got definitely probably close to 70,000 pictures. Well, it's not just signs, folks. I do buildings and fiberglass statues and all that, but I have more than 70,000 photos, I think, at this point, and I just came back from that trip. I have another 3,000 or 4,000 to put up. So I do what I can to get all that up there, because the more people that are going around, that I know a lot of people, they go to my website and they do research before they take a trip so that they can, quantify everything they're shooting out on the road. But the more people that are praising these business owners and word spreads, the better. But when I write articles, like I write for the SCA, I write all the feature articles about signs for them and the sign news columns in their newsletter. I call everybody too. For any kind of a book or a publication, it's like, okay, this is like going to be printed. I can't even update it, so I better know my stuff. So I will call the business owner, I will call the city, whatever I can do to get further information, and then just use your common sense. If they tell you something's from the 30s and it's no way it can be, you got to use a little bit of your own brains to judge the information, because stuff gets passed down that's inaccurate. So, yeah.
All right, great answer. All right, let's bring back all of our panelists for Q&A. And
let's do this because we can. And let's start with André, who I think we can hear now.
Yep, I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
All right, so
great.
André from PAC San Jose, who the people that saved the pig. Is there anything you want to add to that video, André?
I don't know if I have anything to add. I think listening to the other presenters, we have the same issues. The signs are attached to buildings and businesses, and are they landmarks because of the sign? Are they landmarks because of the business? When the business closes, who owns the sign? And so we struggle with some of the same issues that were mentioned in New York and other places. We have managed through some hard work. Our Historic Landmarks Commission did put on our historic resources inventory some Hispanic murals. So they're not neon signs, but they are murals. And so these are also attached to buildings, and some of the businesses may not exist. So we're trying to, find a solution, and hopefully we can apply some of those solutions to our neon signs as well.
I have a question for you about the Western Appliance.
Yes.
Sign. I mean, it's such a massive sign, and I know Western Appliance has the owners have retired, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah.
Are there any prospects for saving that sign?
Yeah, we haven't heard of any specific proposals for what's going to occur with the site. The sign actually goes down through the middle of the building, from my understanding. And one idea, since it's such a ginormous sign, it would be difficult to try to relocate it to some other location, unless maybe using San Francisco's example, we could create some sort of a preservation fund that would, or an ordinance that would allow some matching funds to be brought to bear. But one of the ideas is to create a pocket park next to the building and keep the sign in place, and utilize a small piece of open space next to the sign or underneath the sign. So that's been talked about, but there are no formal proposals that we're aware of yet.
Okay. And one of the questions that one of our attendees brought up was, are any of the T-shirts, buttons, or the merchandise around the dancing pig still available?
Yes, I did. I don't know if folks saw it. I did paste a URL into the chat earlier. I can do that again in a few minutes. It takes you to preservation.org/neon, and there you can buy shirts. You can buy our signs guides, which is a guide of neon signs in the South Bay area, and also contribute also to the restoration of the Orchard Supply Hardware neon sign, which is undergoing restoration right now.
Okay, that was my next question. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad you got that sign back or returned.
Yeah, it's slated to be reinstalled at History Park, which is a historic park in south of downtown. It has currently on it a rail car, an Orchard Supply rail car, and so History San Jose is intending, and the plans are to reinstall it right next to the rail car. So there's a locomotive, caboose, and an Orchard Supply Hardware rail car, and we're going to get the neon sign put up right next to the rail car.
Sounds great. Now, do any of the panelists have questions for each other by any chance?
We have one thing for André. We're already hearing in the chat that the pig pens are not on the website that you listed. So at some point we do need to get a link, because people are pretty excited about the pig pens. That sounds really funny to say. But, and it kind of does bring up this idea of sign, charms, like little sign things. And we noticed that people love sign enamel pens. And I'm going to put up a link where you can get more of those, not of the pig, but of other signs in San Francisco. And I'm wondering, any other panelists, small replicas, books, pens, the sign as a sculptural thing, is that popular in any other city? I don't know if we have any Angelinos.
Well, who's the guy who makes those little mini sign replicas? What's his name?
Oh, thank you. That's Chris Raley, and he will be at the Neon Curiosity Lounge tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. So don't miss Chris, because he's the real deal.
He does some pretty amazing work. Yeah.
Until we get the link fixed with the pins on our website, we didn't even think people would want pins, so we got to fix that. But you can always message us through the website, the contact us link on our website, www.preservation.org. Super easy, and so we can start getting folks lined up to get some pins out to everybody.
The other thing that people always ask too is, like, how do I find a list of the good signs in a city? Somebody wrote and said, Corky, where do you have the list of signs? And I know a lot of effort goes into cataloging, and you can find a lot of the signs on Debra Jane's site. Can you just type in a city, Debra Jane, and
every page has a little search box right top left below the yellow bar, and you can just type in business name or city name, and you'll get a huge results list. It'll have more than just signs, but it'll be clear from the little titles which are the signs versus the statues or the gas stations or whatever. But if you were just looking to shoot San Francisco, you might check out the gas stations and, you know.
Yeah. We do have a list of some of the best signs in the back of our book, which is San Francisco Neon Survivors and Lost Icons. That's a mouthful. And, you know, at the time we listed which ones were working, functioning, lit, and which ones were dark. And of course, that's kind of always changing as signs get
impossible
preserved.
to keep track.
Yeah, it's an ever-shifting landscape, which is also what makes it kind of interesting to go find these signs and photograph them, just because you don't know. Well, they might be working that night. They might not be.
Now, one thing we hear a lot about here in San Francisco, and I'm curious to any of the panelists if this is similar in the areas where you live, is signs, neon signs being replaced with LED, where, you know, and a lot of people feel that's a really great idea, and they'll still consider that a restoration, where they will, you know, brag about the LED work that they had done to restore the sign. And I think most of us agree that that's not a restoration, it's an alteration, or maybe worse. But is that something, like Tom, in New York City or Corky, is that something you have to talk to people about all the time and convince them that no, LED is not the way to go if you're actually looking to restore a neon sign?
Yeah, I would say yeah, because all the sign companies, or most of them, are really pushing LED really hard. So they flood business owners with all this kind of inaccurate information that LEDs are so much greater and they're going to save so much money in the long run, and all of this. And so it's a danger, because, you know, they're getting it pushed on them, and so really you have to rely on the business owner to just know that they don't want LED, or you know, to be specifically looking for neon.
Yeah, it's happened in New York too. You don't know necessarily to talk with the business owner if they're even thinking about doing it. It hasn't happened much, but everybody knows the Katz's Pharmacy sign in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It was this huge, like 3-story storefront sign that hadn't lit up in years. Had, I mean, many, many feet of tubes, all pulled out and replaced with like just, you know, strands of, you know, point-dilated LED lights. It's a nightmare. I mean, to rebend all that glass would be a lot of money, and it was all there. So yeah, it's happening.
Debra Jane, yeah.
All right, I have a question for Debra Jane from Stephen Coles from the Letterform Archive. I'm gonna have to, pardon me, I have to turn sideways to read it. Debra Jane, what's the weirdest question someone has asked when you were out taking photos of signs? That's a good one.
Well, they always assume the worst, that you're from the city, you know, and that you're there like documenting some who knows what situation, you know. So, and I never reveal that I'm taking it for my website. I just say, it's just for me, don't worry. So, weirdest question. Can't think of any weird questions. Just people getting nervous. And then sometimes I've gotten like chased off. You can't take a picture of the sign. You can't take a picture of anything. I'm on the sidewalk. I can take a picture, check the copyright law, and I get into this whole thing. But I'm usually so fast, nobody can even get out of the building. I mean, I pull right up to the spot I want to shoot, take the picture. I'm out of there in 20 seconds. I take one picture and I'm gone. Auto settings, folks. That's it. I know most people, they hang out for like 20 minutes. Like I got 100 stops to make. I can't be, you know, put the sun at my back, park the van. The van doesn't get turned off even when I get gas. That's it. It goes.
All right, you're on the move. Well, 10 states is a lot of ground to cover.
So it doesn't give people time to ask me questions.
Right. Now, I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that you don't even own a tripod.
No.
All right, yeah.
Actually, I do have one, but I've never used it because I thought I would get it and I would take pictures at night, and it was such a pain in the ass. I have no patience whatsoever. So I tried that because I was like in Wildwood, New Jersey, you know, where there's all those signs, and I wanted to take pictures at night. And there's nothing like Wildwood off season, folks. Go there off season when there's nobody there. There's no cars. You can make all the U-turns you want. It's just wonderful. If you like mid-century architecture, you got to go. Book it. I don't know why people are so afraid of COVID. I don't know. I was a little worried, but my patience wore out. It's like June is normally when I do these trips, and I just said, screw it. If I don't do it in August, I got to wait till next June. I'm not waiting till next June. So I just went, wore my mask, slept in my mask, you know. And so I don't know what y'all are waiting for, but put your mask on and go. Go. You don't know if those signs are going to wait for you.
Yeah, I guess you got a point there. Another thing about tripods, they're so damn easy to trip over.
Well,
right.
you know, I cheat. I will admit I cheat. I just, like, I do the best I can with the speed settings on my camera, and I'm not real good at it. I really am not. And then I just like tweak a little at Photoshop, good enough. You know, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, well, and you're producing such a volume of work that, you know, if you were to spend too much time on any photograph, that you never get to the end of this. So.
Yeah, at nighttime I'm too. Lately, as I've gotten older, I can't even shoot at night anymore. I am so wiped after a day. That's it. I can barely, you know. It's like I look at my watch and say, "Well, it's 7:30. I could go shoot." And it's like I can't.
Yeah. Well, how many?
Someday, 8 years till retirement. 8 years till retirement, and then I'll shoot some nighttime.
All right, so hang on to that tripod.
I don't know. I haven't.
Any other questions from anybody? Do you have anything from the chat room?
People are just saying how great y'all are, and there is a post for where you can get little neon sign pins. And we had some pins made up, and we should post them for Trader Sam. And I was going to talk about this for a minute. I don't know if Steve Spiegel or Will Hansen are on, but we started a campaign to restore that sign, and we knew we could raise the money. It's a tiki bar, so you know you can get a good campaign going, and it's such a historic place. It may still be the oldest tiki bar in the city. The crazy thing is we couldn't engage the owners. I mean, they were sort of interested, and they loved to talk about it, and they loved it when you came in and hung out with them in the bar, but they really could never get past the first step. I wonder if anybody else on the panel has found a way to kind of move to the next step with the owner who's just barely interested. Anybody have a cautionary tale or anything they want to share? You know, I know for some places it kind of waits until push comes to shove.
Okay.
I think
it's a lot about relationships. So if we get to know the owner somehow, or, you know, constantly checking back in, see how they're doing, see how their business is doing, and hopefully convince them that it's an asset. And worst case, if they're going to shut the business or something happens, then you're the first person they call.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
Yeah.
Kate Widow says, figure out what their kryptonite is.
Yeah.
So.
What were you going to say, Corky?
I was just going to say, just send in a steady stream of sign enthusiasts, you know, on different business days, just talking up the sign, you know, and pretty soon they'll be like, oh yeah, maybe we should restore that.
You know, that's a good point. I know from initially when we started doing walking tours here in the city, San Francisco, owners would kind of give you the fisheye through the plate glass. But after a year or two, now the owners of a lot of the businesses with great signs, they come out to greet the crowd and engage our tour group in a conversation about their sign. And it's just a great interaction. And they really, I think it really encourages businesses to maintain their sign. If it's within their realm, if they can afford to do it, that they do, knowing that they're getting all this positive feedback.
And I think they come out so that we don't bring the group in, which we learned right away. Don't bring 12 people into a business at once.
Especially small, like a
especially
corner
small,
store or
yeah,
something.
yeah. But I think that's one reason that we keep doing this preservation work, because in the long run, it really is about the businesses and the people in them, and what that means to a neighborhood. And anybody else got a story?
We had a pastry shop in Brooklyn. The sign was dark for decades, and it was years of, just kind of cajoling and working on these guys, and they finally went for it and got it almost all relit. And the thing is just beautiful. I don't know quite what it was that finally got them to go for it, but it was, every time I would go in there, it was sort of like push. They finally did it. Churcos.
Yeah.
Somebody says you walk into the business and show them a book like Googie Redux.
Yeah, showing, and I know our experience has been we talk to people with great neon signs on their business, and then one thing leads to another, and they find out that they're in our book, and they say, "I've been immortalized," and that sign stays lit for years and years. So it just giving the business some credit for having a quality neon sign and maintaining it goes a long way. And I think we're probably speaking to the choir, but I know all of us agree that one of the best ways to preserve neon signs is to support that business. We always encourage people, go in and buy something. It doesn't have to be a lot, but go in and buy something and tell them that part of the reason you came in was because they have this beautiful neon sign on their building, and you hope that they will keep that sign. So it seems very simple, but I think it really is effective.
Al, that's a great segue to sharing the book fair.
You're reverbing.
Yeah, so.
Turn yours off.
Yeah, so tell me about the book fair.
Okay, want you all to know that part of Neon Speaks this year is reverb. So now actually the Museum of Neon Art in Glendale, California has been kind enough to handle or be responsible for the book fair, where we have multiple authors who have worked on books of, all things neon,
including Debra Jane's.
Including Debra Jane's book, will be available for sale through Mona's website. You just go to Mona's site and go to the store link, and you'll see what's available there.
Okay, I'm looking, and Tom's book is here too. And if they're not there, they will be by tomorrow. It looks like they haven't been posted yet, so we got a little bit backwards on the priority here. But this is the link. Go to neonmona.org into the store, and you'll find every day they'll be adding more books, and particularly look out for Debra Jane's book and for Tom's book.
Not to interject, but I just found out today from the American Sign Museum that, I don't know, my crazy English publisher or distributor in Chicago, whichever, they're not going to have any more books until November to give to the museum. So, but anyway, it's out there. You can just look for it. You type in my name, book, and go to my website. It's there somewhere. Amazon has it. Somebody has it. Oh,
and by the way, Corey Siegel from the Museum of Neon Art in Mona has just said that many more titles will be added soon. Oh. Also, there will be interviews will be added on Facebook and Instagram daily. A lot of these authors and photographers were kind enough to do interviews with Museum of Neon Art. So you might want to look for that again on Instagram or Facebook. And I think you can also get to them through the Mona's store page.
That's what we're looking at right now.
Right, but I think that's where I've gone to the videos. If you go down to the icons for Facebook or Instagram, that'll show you what they've posted.
Like right here?
Yeah, down on the bottom there.
Okay. And Corey, tell me if I'm doing something wrong. Oh, okay. So
there they are.
All right, there's
there
Al.
I am. Yeah.
You can see.
Okay, there's the first one.
Yeah.
Stephen Fitz on the lower
Mansion
left.
Vistas. So this is where you want to go to start watching some of these fun author videos. And also they just have the greatest feed. So we're so happy to be partnering with Mona this year. And we're so grateful to be partnering with all you great preservationists. You inspire all of us, and the work you do, as somebody said, it's the neon gods work.
Yeah, and thanks for making this opening night such a success. I don't think we could have got off to a better start. Randall and I will practice a little more on our technical skills, but overall, thank everybody for their patience and all of the hard work the panelists and speakers and presenters are putting into this. This is all coming from the heart. It's just all generosity and community building. So just want you to know how much we appreciate that, and I'm sure our audience appreciates it as well. And we have reached our closing for the evening. So please tune in tomorrow at, we'll be starting at 9:30 a.m. California time. And we have some coming attractions that will roll here. And while we're doing that, if you have anything to say in the chat room, now is the time to do that. If you want to add a link or repeat your links again so people don't lose them, you can do that now. And we will hope to see you all tomorrow morning.
Okay,
right,
so tell them what's going to happen tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, we have 2 behind-the-scenes tours to start with. I wish I could see a little better. We will have Len Davidson giving us a tour of the Neon Museum of Philadelphia. And after that, we will have Dave and Lynn Waller from New England, from the Boston area, will be giving us an insider's tour of the best vintage signs in their collection. And we'll get a look at their shop and the restored firehouse where they store a lot of their work. And then later in the day, we have the Neon Curiosity Lounge. Actually, that starts at 10:45 a.m. That you don't want to miss.
It's going to be wild. That's all I can say.
And then there's a behind-the-scenes tour of the Museum of Neon Art warehouse. And then
Nevada Neon.
We have the great Will Durham from Nevada Neon. The Nevada Neon Project is going to be showing us some of the things that he's been able to save out there in the great state of Nevada. And the evening session is
Matchbooks.
A matchbook tour where we partnered again with the Tenderloin Museum, and we'll be exploring businesses with neon signs and matchbooks for some of those businesses and other businesses in the Tenderloin neighborhood. So it's a combination of neon signage and graphic art and typographers' wildest dreams.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions left in the Q&A. Debra, I don't know if you can go, somebody asked you a question, so if you've got a minute to go type that answer. And you know, basically all you panelists can type in so people can follow up with you. And we'll just watch the rest of this slideshow before we say goodnight. All right, thanks everybody. And we're gonna sign off.
All right, we're signing off soon here. Whose idea was this to do 5 days?
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. And thanks to our sponsors and thanks to the foundations that gave us grants to do the tours that we did tonight and the next couple of nights.
Thank the San Francisco Heritage for their generous grant, and also the National Trust for their generous grant as well. Probably couldn't have done it without them, so thanks very much for that. And with that, I think we're signing off for the night. We look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Good night. Thank you.
And mask up, stay well, be kind, all those good things.